Welcome back, everybody, to the JMO Podcast. I'm your host, Tayler Michels, and our guest this week is Matt Johnson from Ramsey, Minnesota. Matt has a unique perspective of the industry, being a guide since 2002, owner-operator of the Ultimate Panfish League, also employed by Clam Outdoors as the Pro Staff Director for All-Terrain Tackle, Blackfish Gear, and manager of Ice Team. Matt collaborates with so many incredible professional fishermen as well as one himself. We're super lucky to have Matt on this week's podcast. A lot to learn as we head into ice season on this week's podcast. Make sure to visit our Facebook and Instagram pages at Jason Mitchell Outdoors to recommend a guest or a topic for an upcoming episode of the JMO Podcast.
How's it, Matt?
Matt Taylor here.
Yeah. What's up, brother?
How much, man? Are you busy today? What's going down?
Dude, we're busy every day, man.
I bet you are. It's off topic. How are things looking?
We're having a good season. I mean, COVID really didn't impact us like other industries, obviously. How about you?
Well, we're super busy. Obviously, like you say, the fishing industry is something, and you know, Jason is just like he's that guy that when the bullets are flying, he's always looking for a loophole or opportunities. So we're just like, he's got so many irons in the fire for us. Everybody's just running around helter-skelter, and it's a good thing. I mean, to be able to stay busy, we feel fortunate, obviously, during this time. But, well, before we kill all our time here chit-chatting, I want to get into this a little bit. Matt, you have a unique perspective on the industry because you wear many hats, and you influence the industry in different ways. It's kind of interesting. Could you just recap your career a little bit here and bring us up to speed to where you're at today?
Yeah, it's funny. You know, when I was a kid, I always loved to fish. You never think it's going to be a career, of course. And when I was younger, the fishing industry wasn't where it is today. You couldn't go to high school and fish on a team. You couldn't go to college and get a scholarship to fish. Because believe me, if that existed, I would have been right there obsessing over it. But, you know, grew up fishing as a kid just from shore. We didn't have a boat or anything fancy. And ice fishing was really where the playing field became leveled because we could drive our minivan on the ice and get to spots that everyone else could without needing a boat. So ice fishing is where I kind of gravitated towards at a young age. And then as I got into high school and got more involved in fishing and expanded my skill sets, I started writing and found some internet blog forum type sites before Facebook or social media existed. No one knew what social media was at the time. That term wasn't even used in our industry, and got involved with some online fishing forums, started writing more. And when I got to college, realized I could make a lot more money taking people fishing than I could working at Kohl's or McDonald's. So started guiding when I was 18. When I got to college, found my way into a boat, bought an old truck. And man, the obsession became a possession. People joke that I wasn't obsessed, I was possessed, and loved to fish, found niches and ways to do it, was giving seminars on a weekly basis, writing articles, traveling around to fish, meeting new people. We kind of found our own way to network without social media existing, because that's really how you had to do it. And just kind of found myself, you know, chasing that next bite, both on the ice, both in the boat, and metaphorically speaking, on how to advance my fishing career. And, you know, that's how we are today. I'm still doing the same thing. You're still finding ways to push the bar and change directions in a positive way, and find new ways to reach people and interact with people. And, you know, that's just how we do it.
And, you know, where did you grow up specifically? I mean, what's your home core? Like, what are some of your home bodies of water?
You know, it's funny. I grew up in the North Metro in Coon Rapids, Minnesota, and there really isn't any fishing in that area per se. I mean, you have the Coon Rapids Dam, the Mississippi River. You have some smaller lakes in that area, but I wouldn't say I hail from a well-known part of fishing. I didn't grow up in the Brainerd area or I didn't grow up on Lake of the Woods or, out near Devil's Lake. I grew up kind of where I had to ride my bike miles and miles and miles to find a stream to catch fish out of. But once I got my license when I turned 16, I literally killed my parents' car because I drove it too much to go. And I actually killed it on the way back from an ice fishing trip against my dad's better judgment when he said the car was having problems. I burnt that bad boy out on the side of the road, and there I sat for 5 hours because I didn't have a cell phone. No, I would ride my bike to the local dam and fish for carp and rough fish. And if we caught a smallmouth bass or a walleye, by golly, was that a big deal. But we'd go catch, 20, 30, 40 carp in a day and fine tune our ability to fight a fish. Or we'd go to the lake, local lake, and catch a bunch of runty bluegills. And, I really didn't have a home water until I could drive. Then I kind of found my way down to Lake Minnetonka, which is still where I guide today for about 20 years. And, learn some of those more popular pressured lakes in the city area where people would pay you to take them fishing on. And then guiding my way through college down in Mankato, Minnesota, and learn those lakes. And I think for a period of time, I was the only guy down there guiding. I don't think there was any fishing guides that called those lakes home. So I kind of had a cornered audience. And now I just fish wherever. I'm all over the place like you, Taylor. You know how it is. It's and one day you're on Tonka, the next day I'm on Chisago, next day I'm on Forest Lake, the next day I'm in Annandale, the next day I'm guiding for a catfish. It's just, you kind of just soak it in and take people fishing and make sure they learn something more than, hey, here's a limit of fish, and kind of live my career that way on the educational side of things.
Oh yeah, Jason and I call it being a tumbleweed. You for whatever reason you blow around. If there's good bites going on, you blow somewhere that you just haven't fished in a while. You pick a reason, but blowing around like a tumbleweed just to get a bunch of fishing in. It's all good.
Yeah, Mitchell is a tumbleweed. That's right, man.
Yeah. Self-diagnosed tumbleweed, and his diet plan is that of a seagull, as he would say. And you've influenced a lot of people. 20 years of guiding. I can only imagine how many people have been in your boat, how many people you've taken ice fishing, and all of the above. You've also made a pretty big impact in the industry at your current desk job. Talk a little bit about that and kind of what that looks like in the industry.
Yeah, I've been fortunate now I've been working with Clam Outdoors since 2012. And I think anyone that ice fishes or even fishes in general knows of Clam Outdoors now. They made the original fish house and the original ice fishing suit, and so many firsts, it's hard to keep track. And, they were a good partner of mine prior to working for them on a sponsorship level when I was a guide. And so now I get to manage all the pro staff, which is a dream come true. We have about 650 individuals across almost every state in this country now, as well as into Canada and other parts of the North America that encompass not just clam ice fishing, but Blackfish clothing brand, all-terrain bass jigs, big tooth musky baits. I mean, a plethora of different brands. I get to work with all these individuals that bleed the sport like I do. I mean, we're very like-minded because I didn't come to Clam wearing a suit and tie. In fact, Taylor, I don't think I own a suit and tie.
Nice.
If I had a tie in my closet, I think we'd be hard pressed. So I cut my teeth as a guide, as a promoter in this industry, just like these guys and gals I get to work with. So, I think that's cool because I can relate to them on a different level, and I'm sometimes relate to them to a fault. I'll admit. That's I take great pride in our pro staff. I think that's the bread and butter of our brand on what makes things tick. But yeah, I get to work with some awesome people like Jason Mitchell, like Dave Gens, like some of the big name summertime pros like the Brandon Cards who fish in the Bassmaster Elite Series. And I love it, man. I try not to take it for granted, and I learn something new. I mean, most of these guys and gals, if not all of them, are better anglers than I am. And I learn something every time I meet with them or talk with them or fish with them. And but yeah, I get to strategize with this awesome marketing team at Clam. We have a great team here that gets to work on all kinds of projects. Man, we're going 7 directions at once every single day because we're so fluid of a brand, from open water to ice fishing to selling trailers to selling screen tents to bass fishing to muskie fishing to walleye fishing. So it's pretty awesome. We're a pretty dynamic brand. And yeah, man, I get to, do photo shoots and all kinds of stuff. It's one of those things where if you ask me when I was in college what my dream job would be, Tayler, I think I'm doing it. And
yeah.
I try to breathe heavy every morning and go to sleep with a clear conscience and be proud of what I do. And so far I'm going on, like I said, started in 2012. It's a 7-day-a-week job. You're working late at night. You're working early in the morning. It's not for the faint of heart. If you want to work a 9 to 5, you know this. If you want to work a 9 to 5, don't enter the fishing business. It doesn't exist unless you work in specific categories. But if you want to work in marketing in the fishing business, you better be prepared to work evenings and weekends and never sleep, because that's just the beauty of it.
For everything you just said, I'm so glad that we talked about this, because I think that's what gives you have such a unique perspective in the industry, because you collaborate with other fishermen, but you realize all these fishermen are also collaborating with you because you're a fisherman. And so that's what we're going to tap into here today. I want to talk about trendy ice topics. I want to cover it all, and we can bite this off in chunks. I want to talk about some of the new stuff that's coming out with the companies you're working with. Also, just some of your own perspective and what you love about early ice, and just some of the early ice fishing that you're going to do. But we can start at kind of the beginning of that. What are some of the trendy ice topics for you in your world right now, heading into this 2020 ice season?
One big one that's near and dear to my heart is obviously, we all know Dave Gentz and how he pioneered this sport. I mean, he really, without him, we wouldn't even be ice fishing the way we do today. And, it's the 40th anniversary of the Fish Trap, which I think is worth noting if you think about it. I'm not even 40 years old. And he designed the first flip over fish house, which truly catapulted what we know as modern technology, ice fishing and mobility. 40 years ago, he made that in his garage because he didn't want to sit in a hard-sided shack and wait for the fish to come to him. He wanted to chase them down. So we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of that this year, which is super cool. And if you've seen the original one, which has graced its presence at various ice fishing shows over the last decade, we kind of mimicked that one after it. We kind of came up with that cream-colored canvas, red accent, stenciled on Fish Trap logo look. But 40 years of the Fish Trap is pretty astounding. And if you talk to Dave Gentz about it, it's hard for him not to tear up, and rightly so. I just put things in perspective from my shoes and think about it like, man, 40 years ago, to have thought of that, and we're still using that same technology. The technology really, in the grand scheme of things, hasn't changed. There may be some lights and some better canvas and some better poles and different sleds, but the use of that product is the exact same it was 40 years ago. And you can't really say that for many, many fishing products really at all. I mean, you think about fishing rods, they're all different materials. Everything about it. But so that's kind of a cool deal. I'm excited to really get in front of that and talk to more people about that at some more of these shows coming up. Obviously, tackle is a big one. I lose track of what's new and what's not new and what works and what doesn't work. And when it comes to tackle, I'm a victim of that as well. If you look through my jig boxes, I'm like a retail store. I got more tackle than I can use in a lifetime. So some of the trendy stuff is soft plastics and, artificial stuff for ice fishing. In the bass walleye world of summer, artificial is not a new term, and it's really not a new term in ice. But if you look at the advancements, now we are using, thread. We're using silk thread on our jigs to catch fish. That new item this year called the Silky. I got to play with it last year, Tayler, and it's super cool. Fish can't tear it up. They can't pull your plastic off. They can't beat it up. It doesn't, go on crooked. So just artificials for catching panfish and walleyes through the ice, I would say is super trendy. Jigging minnows like that Tika minnow that Mitchell got to play with last year and he crushed some walleyes on. And I think a big trendy thing that's going to continue to push is just leaving the bait at home, not putting maggots on and not putting minnows on to catch fish. I don't think it's hit its peak yet. I don't. I think you're going to see more companies push the bar on allowing anglers to be more efficient by not having to use live bait to catch fish. Because I can tell you what, I haven't used live bait to catch a bluegill or crappie in probably a decade. And it's going to continue down that path. And that's just super cool. And I think that's kind of fun to to be riding that wave.
Yeah, man. It seems like, like the trends are just going to that efficiency, and, people's time is valuable, right? I mean, you have to value your time if you're only going to get to fish a little bit, or if you fish a lot. Talk about the advancements in those baits and what that's done for fishermen on the ice.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, like I said, I still do quite a few guide trips in the wintertime, not as much as I used to. But I mean, being efficient and being able to be reactive and also stay aggressive. I mean, not having to dip your hand in a minnow bucket, not having to keep minnows alive, not having to rebait all the time. You can be a lot more productive on the ice, and you can chase down fish. I mean, mobility. I own and run the longest running ice fishing league in the country, and we've been doing it since 2002. And if you watch the way these anglers fish, if you're not getting after it, by getting after it, I mean hole hopping and chasing down the fish and doing the mobility thing, you're not going to cash checks in these tournaments. And if you want to be a productive ice angler, let's say you're not tournament fishing, you still want to go out there and make the most of it and catch the most fish and catch the biggest fish. You need to stay mobile. And if I can just hole hop and drop that presentation down without my minnow head freezing solid or my maggot dying or my minnow falling off, that's efficiency. And you can do that with these artificial baits, and it's not just something, that you use for finicky bluegills anymore. I'm using large profile artificial baits to catch crappies, and spoons with no bait, and tikka minnows and plastics, and catching walleyes on them. And it's amazing what you do. And what I've done as a guide with my clients, because I still get those clients that are like, all right, Matt, give me the maggots. And I'll always have maggots with me. That's the right thing to do as a fishing guide. But the second their maggots fall off, I'll hand them a different rod without maggots. And let's say just a plastic tail. And I'll say, drop that down. Well, there's no bait on there. I'm like, drop it down. Well, they drop that down, they catch a fish, and all of a sudden they're building that confidence factor. And they're going, wow, I didn't put bait on that time, and I caught a fish. Hey, you know what, Matt? I'll hold on the bait for a while. Now they're catching fish without bait, and they go, I don't need that bait to catch fish. And then they see their fish size increase, and they start to go, man, I've been missing out all along by tipping these maggots on my hook, catching these runty bluegills. Now I'm catching big bluegills. So, you're right. I mean, you find those nuances to help you catch more and bigger fish. And I think a big one for anglers out there is to find confidence in artificials. You will see the size of your fish get larger, no questions asked. We've proved that to be true time and time again. So, that's one easy pattern to consider is just, do you want to increase your size? You want to be more efficient, more productive? Find ways to not have to carry around live bait, no doubt.
The JMO Podcast is sponsored by Long Haul Trucking. Long Haul's always looking for more skilled professional CDL drivers to join their team. They're a people-first company, and it shows. Their employee-owned, asset-based fleet of over 350 Conestogas is among industry leaders in pay and benefits geared towards long-term success and growth for company drivers and owner-operators. If you're a professional driver or a company that wants to ship product with the best in the business, get a hold of Long Haul at 1-800-255-5153 or find them online at longhaultrucking.com. Long Haul, running on the power of promises kept. Yeah, let's we'll come back to new stuff and new gear, but I want to dig into even deeper into everything you just said. I mean, you fish some pressured lakes. You talk about the metro area. There's a lot of fishermen in your neck of the woods, and some good fishermen, and there's some good productive water down there. What is it about about the success of some of these newer baits, and why should some of these people be considering these newer baits and artificial baits? In terms of how it's catching fish. What do you think is happening down there? I mean, the fish just ain't educated on them. They're seeing something new. Do you think everybody's doing one thing, so when you try something new, it works? I mean, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, you're spot on. I would say that, the area I fish and guide, I would argue that it's the most pressured area of ice fishing in the world. I mean, you look at the epicenter of ice fishing, it's in Minnesota. I mean, it just is. I mean, the largest population of ice anglers is in Minnesota. It's insane. There's millions of ice anglers that fish here. And I'm fishing, of course, all the lakes within 60 miles of Minneapolis, St. Paul, the heart of it. And I think what's going on is these fish, you're right, they see so many baits. There's so much pressure. There's so much noise on the ice. There's so much so much going on that we don't think about, that you have to trigger these fish to bite. You got to get that impulse bite. So you want to do something that's a little more aggressive, something that's a little different. They're not going to just sit and stare at a minnow. They're not going to just sit and stare at a teardrop jig packed with maggots. I'm going to trigger these fish to bite. You know, I've been using that pinhead minnow with no bait for a few years now. That's been a big push of mine, and I take great pride in that, turning people on to catching fish on that. It's just so many anglers have a hard time dropping a spoon down without a minnow head or maggots. It blows my mind. I mean, I haven't tipped my spoons for panfish with bait in years. They will eat it without bait, and you're not at the mercy of the bait. So what anglers do when a fish comes on their Vexilar, they hold their breath, they pause their bait, and they let it sit there. Well, I don't know, Taylor, if you've ever seen a fish feed under the ice, a bait never stops dead still when a big crappie swims up to it. Never happens.
Right.
Never. That insect, that minnow, that crustacean, I don't care what it is, flees to beat the band away from that slab crappie, bluegill, perch, walleye. It does not want to get eaten. It doesn't stop in its tracks and go, uh-oh. Never happens in real life. But as ice anglers, we always see that big mark show up in our Vexilar, and we just stop what we're doing. Well, you know what? That is the worst thing you can do on a negative bite. I think to the contrary, in a negative bite, you got to work that bait away from the fish, because that fish may be eating one time that day when the bite's negative. And I can tell you what, it's not going to swim up to a motionless bait and eat it. So using spoons with no bait, using tikka minnows with no bait, using a jig and plastic, you know, and you are the power behind it. You're the one that controls what that presentation does, I think, is what seals that deal. So now I can get out there. I can go in the middle of a school of anglers. You can have 30 fish traps set up on a wintering hole community spot, and I can just kind of sift through some of those holes and open holes and jag in between these people and pick out fish when they're coming out of their shack going, what the heck are you doing? I haven't caught a fish in 2 hours. Well, because more than likely that angler's got a minnow on a jig, on a bobber, dangling 5 feet off the bottom, just swimming around. Where I can come through with a jig and spoon, be more aggressive, give them something they're not used to seeing, and trigger those negative fish into biting. That's what you got. That's the way you got to look at it. You got to figure out what these fish are accustomed to seeing. You got to find these fish that are more aggressive, and you have to also get off the beaten path. So I've learned so much running this fishing league over the last 18 years that if you watch where these successful anglers are fishing, it's nowhere near the community holes. They are finding fish up in the shallow weeds in the high sunny days and 6 feet of water, and they're catching them. They're getting off the beaten path, and they're chasing these fish down more often than not with artificial presentations.
And you talk about the influence of running your fishing league. You know, are there some things that really stick out? You got some stories that really stick out in your mind, like turning points in your own career where you were influenced by that, where you're like, oh my God, like an epiphany. And then you went and put it into action, you know, like how did you build your confidence with being the type of guy that's going to go off the beaten path? Because that's hard for a lot of people. You know, if they have a community hole and they know they can go out and catch, say, enough fish for a meal, they maybe look out their fish trap window at you with a little bit of envy. How do we help build their confidence by maybe teaching them how you built yours?
Well, first and foremost, you have to be willing to fail. And I think too many anglers are scared to death to fail. They want to look at where all the fish houses are and say, well, that's where the bite is. And they could be right. You could go there and catch some fish. But I can promise you more often than not, that's not where the best fish in the lake are. And it's a lot, there's different mindsets in fishing. This is ice fishing and open water fishing. And I've talked with anglers about this. Actually, just this last fall, I was talking with anglers about this, about how your mindset as a fishing guide and a tournament angler is two different mindsets. And your mindset as a fishing guide, tournament angler, and a weekend warrior are all different mindsets. So you have to ask yourself, what's your goal in a day of fishing? If you want to just go out there, hang out with your friends or family, set up a shack, camp out all day, maybe catch some fish, tell some jokes, drink some beers, great. You have the easiest path for success if that's your mindset, because fishing's a bonus, right? Now, is your mindset as a fishing guide to put your client on a limit of crappies or bluegills to take home for dinner? It's not about catching giants or trophies. If you catch a trophy, awesome. But do you want to catch fish? Then maybe your community spots will produce enough fish to go home, bring some bluegills and crappies home, maybe a walleye, maybe a pike or two and a tip-up, and it's a successful day. Or is your mindset to go out there and bring in 10 pounds of crappies and bluegills in 15 fish to win a tournament? Well, you know what? Those are all different paths. You have different paths of success for each one of those. And what I've seen with these tournaments is that more often than not, these what we call winning bags, these big bags of fish, are rarely caught where the community fishermen are sitting. These anglers have to find fish off the beaten path because that's generally where the bigger fish are. And generally, they're fishing shallow water. They're fishing in the weeds. They're fishing more immediate break lines. They're not out in the community holes. I'll rarely see guys and gals in the UPL, which is the Ultimate Panfish League, sitting in community holes all day. They may go to a community spot to fill out a limit or to catch one or two extras just to get their limit, but they're not going to be there when they're trying to win a tournament. And that's one thing that I noticed, luckily at a young age, because I started the UPL when I was, 19 years old. I couldn't even have a beer with these guys when I started the fishing league. It was like, I couldn't go and have a beer after the tournament with some of the guys in the league because I wasn't old enough to have one.
That might have helped you stay focused.
Yeah. But I learned at a young age that if you want to catch bigger fish, you have to be willing to fail. You have to get off the beaten path. You have to take a risk. You have to work at it. Right. And that's a testament. I mean, if you look at our youth out there nowadays, the way these young anglers fish, man, they are putting the time in, they're putting the effort in. They have a lot better tools than we did. I didn't have a GPS when I was 19. I couldn't mark where I caught the fish yesterday and come back to them. I couldn't imagine having some of those tools at my fingertips when I started fishing, 20 years ago. But they're still putting in the effort. And that's one thing I'd tell anglers is that be willing to fail. Don't ever fish the same spot twice, even if you're on a bite. If you are on a bite and you want to get better at fishing, force yourself to try something different. Find another spot where they're biting on. Find another pattern that they're biting on. Expand your ways of how you catch fish. Because when you have those days, those lakes you're not used to fishing, you will become a better angler. You will know what to do on a lake you've never targeted versus just scratching your head and going, oh, hey, look, there's 20 fish traps on that spot. I'm going to go over there. Yeah. I would tell you, not the way to go about it. Not if it was me. So
I want to deep dive into that. I'm going to cut you off right there. I want to deep dive into that and stay on topic right there because this is perfect. The technology, the fast-paced technology we have to us. Talk about going on new water. Utilizing the technology, and just maybe just some of your general fishing knowledge that you've accumulated over the years. I mean, let's talk about targeting some of these, I'm not going to say first ice, but just early ice panfish bites if you're going to target a new lake. And, in some cases you've been to a lake, but what's old is new. You maybe haven't been there for 10 years. These lakes are changing nowadays. Right. What's your recipe for success or just strategy? It's not always success, but what's your strategy when you're going into a fish in a lake that you ain't been to in a while?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing too many anglers don't utilize is you got to do your homework. And what I mean by that is so much. I mean, I guide on Lake Minnetonka multiple times a week. I'm still looking at a lake map multiple times a week on my couch or my Navionics on my phone or my Navionics on my laptop. I'm still looking at that before every single fishing trip. And I think too many anglers don't do that. They take it for granted. They go to their community spot or they go to the spot where they caught fish last. They struggle to catch fish there. Then they're stumped. Then they go, oh boy, it's going to be a long day. Where if you do your homework the night before or the week prior or whatever it might be, you can look at productive spots. You can find 2 more spots nearby. You may ask yourself the question, okay, what if this spot does not produce tomorrow? It should produce, but what if it doesn't? If your answer to that question is, I have no idea what I'm going to do next, you are setting yourself up for failure. Because if you're trying to answer that question on the ice after spot A doesn't produce, and you don't know where spot B is, you're wasting time. And you cannot get, the one thing you can't have more of is time. I know that's cliche, but it's so true. What I like to do before I hit the ice, I don't care if I fish the lake 10 times in the last 11 days. I'm still going to look at spot A, B, C, D, E, F, G on what I'm going to do, how I'm going to approach it. What's the weather going to be like? What's the bite been like? Are we going to get some snow? Are we going to have a lot of wind? Where's the wind going to come from? Am I going to hole hop outside? If I need to hole hop outside, am I going to get beat to death by the wind? Just like we do in the boat, we look for spots to fish out of the wind. Too many anglers don't think about that on the ice. You still have to deal with wind on the ice. If you and I go fishing tomorrow, Tayler, let's say, or next week or in 2 weeks, and we're going to go ice fishing, and the bite requires us to hole hop, do you want to hole hop in the wind, or do you want to hole hop where there's no wind?
Right.
Pretty sure you and I are both going to say, let's get out of the wind.
Yeah.
We don't think about that stuff on the ice. We just don't. And it's one thing to have a fish trap and move around that way, but I am way more efficient running around on the ice than I am sitting inside a fish house. So those are all things you want to think about. And then you want to look at your navionics. You want to mark some spots that look productive. You want to make sure the spots you fish are not all over the lake. Because if my first spot is on the far east basin and my second spot is on the far west point, I don't want to drive across the lake. You may have 5 more spots near the east basin that are productive or look good that you can check before you drive across the lake. So those are all things you want to take into account. What can you do off the ice so that when you hit the ice, you're more productive? Too many anglers don't think that way. They just go, hey, we're going to go hit this deep point. There's fish there. There's always fish there. Well, what happens when you get there and those fish are gone or they're not biting? The last thing you want to do, like I said, is go, oh, crap. What am I going to do next? Well, let's hop in the truck quick and look at a lake map. No. I'm going to tell you what we're going to do next when if the first bite's not working because I already have a plan.
Yeah, so, it all adds into that efficiency. You know, a lot of people are thinking, you know, and this is totally normal, but there's a lot of people think that, you know, just having the stuff, having the right gear in terms of a catch rate efficiency, but also just your fishability, because let's be real. Somebody's catching them somewhere. So the excuse of, well, they just weren't biting today, it's getting harder and harder to lean on that crutch because guys are catching fish.
Right. Fish eat every day, Tayler. They eat every day. I don't care what anyone tells you. Fish eat every day. You got to figure out where the fish are biting. You got to figure out what they want. You got to figure out what mood they're in. And you got to be willing to adapt and move. When anglers come to me at the Access and I'm like, how'd you do? They weren't biting today. I'll tell them they're lying. They're biting today. You just didn't. What'd you do? Well, I went out to my spot I catch them every night on, you know. Oh, so that's the only spot you fished? That's the only spot I fished. Well, why didn't you move? Well, they always bite there. Well, they didn't bite there today. What'd you use? Well, I used my good old trusty chartreuse, whatever. Did you try anything else? Well, no. If they don't bite on that, they're not eating. Well,
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I'm not eating the same thing every day.
It sounds like you were talking to my dad at the Access quite a bit. It's
like we just don't think outside the box enough, and we get stuck in ruts. And it's the same thing. I mean, I'm telling some of these guys the same thing at seminars every year, you know. And once you find those nuances and ways to adapt, and once you just start getting outside your comfort zone, and it's hard to at times, I get it. Start finding ways to get outside your comfort zone, and you will become a better ice angler. You'll become a better open water angler. If you become a better river fisherman, you'll become a better bass fisherman, walleye. I don't care what you're doing. Find ways to become better outside your comfort zone. Expand your horizon, whether it's new spots, new techniques, new tactics, new lures, new ways of fishing, new lakes, new fishing partners. The more you find ways to adapt, the better angler you'll become. That's one guarantee I can give you, is the more you adapt, the more you expand your horizon, the better angler you will become, hands down, no questions asked.
Yeah, and you touch on something there that I want to go to next. You know, you talk about gear. If you're an avid fisherman, you know, maybe in your group of friends you might be the guy. You might be the most productive guy on the water. But if you look in your tackle box and most of your gear is, you know, 5 or 10 years old. And you're the type of guy that's outside hole hopping, you're missing out on some great efficiency and gear technology. I mean, rods and, you know, and just the makeups of some of that stuff, you know, bigger eyelets, line selection. You know, a lot of people are stuck in the mono world, or a lot of guys are stuck in the braid, you know, like, you know, talk a little bit about that. I mean, you know, getting back to your unique perspective, you're hands-on with some of the best technology and best products in the whole industry. So maybe let's do a little deep dive on some of that in terms of the new technology that, you know, the modern angler needs to be on.
Yeah, and you're spot on. And real quick before we move on there, one thing I always like is, I've met so many phenomenal anglers out there, but you can always tell the guys that get stuck in a rut because they have their home body of water, and they may be a phenomenal guide on their home. You may have a Mille Lacs fishing guide, let's say, that fishes Mille Lacs every day, and no one can beat him on Mille Lacs, him or her. And that angler goes someplace else and they just struggle. They can't catch them. That's the stuff that you want to avoid. I mean, you want to find ways to become a well-rounded angler, and those are good ways to adapt. And we've all seen it to where, like, somebody gets off their home water and they don't even know what to do. That's what I would encourage anglers to consider. But yeah, technology-wise, man, we are spoiled beyond belief. I mean, it's crazy. I mean, I remember having to go on the ice years ago where it would take us a while to find the hump still because we had to find it. Now you can just go right out there because you marked a spot, you have it on your GPS, you have Panoptics, you have all this fancy gizmos and doodads to put you right in the fish. You have tricked out snowmobiles and ATVs with you have 10 grand worth of electronics on your snowmobile now, just like your boat on the water to get out there and chase fish. I mean, if you have money, if you're financially stable, you can buy all the best tools to catch the fish. You don't need to do the work. I mean, we always joke on the summer side of things. When I started guiding, your boat control was everything. Good guides compared to great guides were, in my opinion, separated by their boat control. Now, if you have the money, anglers can just go out there and push one button called spot lock, and you can stay on the fish and not have to worry about boat control at all. So those are things. But yeah, on the ice, we have such great fishing rods. We have the latest and greatest technology for reels and ways to drop your presentation down to the fish. We have the best hooks and jigs on the market. We have the most supple plastics. We have the best electronics to show you everything these fish are doing. We have underwater cameras. We have the most cutting edge, no pun intended, augers on the system that are 10 pounds that can cut 200 holes on one battery. Yes, battery, no gas, and super efficient. We have lightweight fish houses with the lights. We used to have to go to Menards and buy lights and buy homemade accessories that we'd rig on these fish houses so we could be more efficient. Now you can go to the neighborhood tackle store and buy those things that are name branded under Clam or other brands. We have the best tools to get the job done. You have these new systems like the Panoptics and Live Scope and all this stuff that you can actually follow these schools of crappies around the basin. I used to have to punch 40 holes to stay on top of these fish. I was in better shape in the winter than I was during soccer season in the summer. We always joke about it because of ice fishing. Like, if you wanted to stay on a school of crappies, you better be fit or you're not going to catch them, because you have to punch a lot of holes and you got to run around a lot. Now you just punch one hole and you drop the Panoptics down and spin it around and say, there's the school 30 yards that way, cut a hole, you'll be on them. It's just mind boggling. The technology nowadays to catch fish. These poor fish don't have a chance.
Yeah, if you do it right, that's the thing. And one thing I hear a lot, in my position, and we go places and we hear it all the time, then the compliments of like the fishing rods, for example, the species specific rods. You guys have, and I'm gonna say you guys, getting into your marketing side of your job, the species specific rod. Talk to me a little bit about some of that technology, and how people need to be utilizing some of that in terms of just the trendy fishing technology in the species specific rods.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice because I know a lot of anglers 10, 20 years ago, they only had one or two ice fishing rods. That's what they had in their arsenal, and they would tie a bobber on and whatever bit, right? Now you can go out there and attack fish with, I got a dozen panfish rods for different applications. So, noodle rods, spring bobber rods, tight lining rods, short rods, long rods, dead sticking rods. You're spot on. You can get so niche with how you approach just one species of fish, let alone a day of fishing or a week of fishing. We have the high-end titanium spring bobbers that don't kink, so you can see the most supple little bite. You have the noodle rods with oversized guides, so you can set it up in a dead stick application and watch that crappie bend that rod without knowing anything's there. You can go out and chase Walleyes, again, with multiple ways. You can have your jig rod, you can have your dead stick rod, you can have your bobber rod, you can have a long rod if you're going to hole hop so the line's not being blown around the ice. You can have a short rod if you're buttoned up against the inside of a hard shack. Then you can go out there and chase, your trout with longer, even stronger, more powerful rods. You can back off a bit the same day and grab your perch jerkin rod, your meat stick rod. Now we have dead stick rods in different actions. You have your meat stick rod and your dead meat rod. So are you going to be targeting, bluegills and crappies, or are you going to be targeting walleyes? I mean, man, we're spoiled. And I can understand how it's overwhelming for a potential buyer that walks into a store. Let's say a buyer walks into a Shields. Man, they're going to walk in there and see rows and rows of ice fishing rods and reels and go, oh boy. And part of it is, that's actually the beauty of our industry, is that you have so many options. If you can't find a rod that fits the situation that you're going to walk into that next day, boy, then I'd like to meet you.
Yeah, for sure.
You can find a rod at Shields that, they, or any retailer out there that really dabbles in ice fishing well, that will suit what you need tomorrow to go ice fishing.
Yeah, these are like the best conversations to have with ice fishermen, just because I think collectively we're just built to be guys that like to have stuff, man. Like if you just want to, like if you want to just be a nut about something, pick ice fishing, because it's like there's no greater thing to be obsessive about than the sport of ice fishing with all the cool stuff. But all right, man, well let's round this out here. We're doing so good on time. Let's round this out. Early ice. What do you look forward to the most coming out of that fall season, coming into your early ice season? What are you gearing up for battle for first? What are maybe a memory in the past, or something you're looking forward to this year? What is early ice to you, Matt Johnson?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, my weaning hours in the boat, my last few weeks on the boat, I am marking spots for ice. A lot of anglers do not do that, and you're making a grave mistake. I am marking late October, even early November, depending on where you are and where your ice forms. I'm marking where the best weeds are deep still. I'm marking inside transition areas. I'm marking where the bait fish was last seen. I'm marking where I caught a bunch of crappies, days before the first skim of ice. And those are important things to pay attention to, because it takes away some of the guesswork. I'm way more efficient finding structure in my boat than I am on the ice. Way more efficient. And if I can do some of that, let's say in the weaning hours and days of open water, that can make you a more productive ice angler. So I keep that stuff into account. And then I look at the body of water. How fast do certain bodies of water freeze up? Ice safety is so important. We need to make sure ice safety is the number one thing on your mind. If it's not, then you need to go back to the drawing board and make sure that it is. I look at, okay, can I get on a bite that's close to shore? I don't want to have to walk out a mile. I don't care who anyone is. I don't want to walk a mile to ice fish. I don't care what anyone tells you. No one wants to do that. No one wants to walk a mile to ice fish. So if I can walk 2 blocks or 50 yards or 20 yards to get on a bite, I'm going to do that at first ice. So I look at the bodies of water I'm going to fish. How far do I have to get out there? Because usually I'm walking out right away when I ice fish. Early ice is not the time of year to bring everything you got. Early ice is the time of year you bring 2 rods, your Vexilar, a small pocket full of jigs, maybe a bucket. I mean, you're going to be traveling light. I'm walking out with a good pair of spikes on my feet, a spud bar. I'm definitely going with a buddy, and we're going to be light and mobile.
I love it, man. Let's tie it off with what are your social medias? Where can people find some of your content and fishing reports and some of those things?
Absolutely. You can find me, Matt Johnson Outdoors is my business. I started about 20 years back, and I got a Facebook page, Matt Johnson Outdoors. If you type it in, you'll see me on there. I got an Instagram, MJ Fishing. I don't even know my alias is on there. MJ Outdoors Fishing, MJ Fishing Outdoors. You'll find it on there too. Matt Johnson Outdoors on Instagram. MattJohnsonOutdoors.com is my website. So you can find me on all those good things. You can ask questions. I mean, I'm going to answer them. the best I can. Otherwise, I'm going to be hopefully doing more events, more shows here as we look things down the pipeline and get on the ice and just share some of these memories and experiences with everybody.
I love it, Matt. Yeah, man, I'll let you back at it unless you want to leave anything else out there.
I think that's it. Go out there, make some memories, set some hooks, catch a big one, learn something new every week, whether it's a tip, a tactic, like I said, a new body of water, meet a new fishing friend, and keep pushing that limit. Get outside your comfort zone to become a better angler and just go out there and have some fun.
I love it, man. We'll talk to you.
All right, brother. Thanks, Tayler.
Later, man.
Bye.
And thank you all for following along on another episode of the podcast. If you're following on YouTube, Spotify, Stitcher, or Apple Podcasts, make sure to like, subscribe, share with your fishing friends, and head over to our social medias on Facebook and Instagram at Jason Mitchell Outdoors, where you can recommend a guest or a topic for an upcoming show.